This is Joe,
Michelle,
Melissa,
and Shannon
with More Than a Sniff, where we talk about everything dog.
From training to nutrition,
from behavior modification to grooming,
from vet visits to dog parks,
from getting to know us to having guests. Today we're going to talk about... So on our podcast here, we really like to, it's just more of an educational podcast on everything dogs, and our series is on dogs with jobs and just kind of going through, it's kind of a series with dogs working and their handlers and what they do. And so I have Shannon here and Michelle and Melissa, who all train here with us. And we do, the majority of what we do is obedience and mostly behavior modification. So we don't necessarily always get to work with the super fun-driven, let's do something dogs. So it's always fun to hear trainers that get to work on kind of from a different world from us. So if you'll tell us a little bit about you and how you got into what you're doing and what the dogs' jobs are that you work with.
Sure. Are we already going?
We are.
And everything? Okay. So my name is Brianna Messerschmidt. I have been with the company that I'm working with right now called Hollywood Paws for the last 9 years. It is a studio animal rental company, meaning that I train dogs predominantly, as well as some other animals for things in media, TV, movies, commercials, all that jazz. I got my start by going to a school that is also in California, called the America's Teaching Zoo. It's also known as the EDM program, which is the Exotic Animal Training and Management Program. It is in Moore Park, which is actually a zoo. So it's a 2-year program. I take classes, I learn about behaviors of different animals at the zoo, I learn about training styles and all of that, and then I actually go and practice on the animals at the zoo during those 2 years. At the end of that program, you do internships, and I decided to do an internship in several different places, but one of which is at Hollywood Paws, or was at Hollywood Paws, and I have been there ever since.
That's great. And this is Melissa. Can you tell us a little bit about what your typical workday is like?
Sure. Typical. That's a funny word for this. So I don't have necessarily a typical day just because it is going to be always different depending on what's going on. And so even when we were scheduling like this interview, I had to be kind of upfront and say we have to be flexible just because I never know what my schedule is going to be like. Generally, what happens is when people want to hire a dog for a production, they will contact me either through email or on the phone or something and say, hey, we need a dog to do X, Y, and Z. We prefer it looking this way. And so I would start a conversation with them about the dogs that we have, specifically the ones that can do exactly what they want as opposed to just the look of the dog, and have a full-on conversation of booking a dog over the phone. Then that conversation shifts over to a computer, so it's not exciting or anything, just onto a computer where I send headshots of the dog, or dogs that fit the look as well as the action of what they're going for. And from there, the director, producer, whoever, picks which one they want the most, and then that dog gets to go on set when they're doing their production. That is a typical kind of feel for a day of actually booking dogs. We also do training for dogs and evaluations during the week. So that looks like owners who are interested in getting their dogs into this kind of work. We actually do work with them. We're the only company that does at this moment. Most studio animal rental companies own all of their own animals, which is perfectly fine. It's just a different business plan, and kind of go that route. Versus we find the predominant amount of our dogs from the public. We make sure that they're well enough trained before they would ever go on set. But we find our dogs that way. And so because of that, We offer classes to make sure that the dogs are well enough trained. We offer evaluation so that if the owner has done training on their own, we can kind of see where they're at with their training and if they have trained the dog well enough specifically in studio work as opposed to just other versions of dog training, as well as kind of educate the public who do come in about how the process works and what we're looking for specifically in studio dogs. So I'm also a teacher in that way. And then, so that's kind of a second parter of my job. And then a third parter is actually going on set. So after a dog has been selected by a production team, then I would actually go get that dog from the owner, go to the production set and work the dog.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
That is fascinating. Can you tell us a little bit about your working dog philosophy?
Working dog philosophy, as in my training dog philosophy?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Yes, so I also work behavior modification, meaning, whatever I do, the dog or the animal should have some kind of response, and I then either reinforce or don't reinforce that behavior. So we do go off of that. Most of our training is done through positive reinforcement. We do not work with any dogs that are particularly aggressive, so I don't have to handle or really do any training that you guys were kind of talking about earlier when it comes to that element of dogs. Mm-hmm. Just because if a dog is dangerous, we don't want that dog on set. So it kind of ends their journey in this process kind of right there. And if you try too hard to get a dog who is kind of leaning towards aggressiveness on set, it's just generally not worth it. Anything can be done through training, at least practically, but it's really not worth it for us. So I don't really have to deal with that part. But I do work with, like I said, mostly positive reinforcement. In our version of dog training and whatnot, the dog needs to be always 20 feet away from the trainer. So everything is voluntary with the dog. If the dog doesn't look like they're enjoying themselves or not having fun or really just doesn't feel like doing it, they can walk away at any moment, as well as there is a camera on them. So if they don't look happy, the camera's going to see that and you're also not going to get the shot. So everything we do has to be completely on a voluntary basis with the dog. So we use a lot of treats. Other things we can also kind of use like petting and, different varieties of reinforcers. However, we find the most success with treats. If there's anything else that I am missing when it comes to that. And then we use the three main, ways to train something, the capturing, shaping, and creating to get the behaviors in the first place.
So what do you think are some myths or misconceptions that the public might have about what you do?
Oh, there's so many. Like I kind of mentioned earlier, there is a big element of my job of just educating the public, because people will contact me wanting to learn more or get their dogs involved and not really have a good idea about what the process is even like. So some myths are that the most important thing is what the dog looks like. I don't think that is true, just because we cannot represent a dog based on its looks alone. It could be the cutest dog in the whole wide world, but if it is not well enough trained specifically in studio work, it'll not be successful on set, and we will not take it on set. So a lot of people think, oh, well, if you just see my dog, you'll understand. Right. And that's just not the case. And so it's a lot of educating. You're right. It's absolutely an adorable dog. However, it might not be good for studio work, at least yet, because it doesn't have the background training. So there's one. Number two, that acting and modeling for animals is different. That is not true. Myth. So with animals, acting and modeling is completely the same thing. Sometimes people will say, well, I just want my dog to do the easy stuff like photo shoots and print ads. I don't want them to do acting like movies or something. And it is all the same stuff for the dog. There's no difference whatsoever. There's no difference in pay. There's no difference in training. If anything, photo shoots and stills, which people tend to think is easier, is actually much more difficult, just because the dog has to be put in a position, typically, unless there's still action involved, which is also still true for stills, but they have to be put in a position, and then their tail has to be in the exact right spot, and their eyes in the exact right spot. And they're not given much leeway to just be a dog, to shake their tail, to kind of look around, to kind of have an ear flinch every now and then. In photo shoots, it has to be very, very still unless there is an action involved. And even then, the action, they have to have like the perfect stance mid-walk or something. So it can be very, very difficult, and the public tends to believe the exact opposite of that. That, number one, it's easy, and number two, it is different from acting. Number three, that it is a super glamorous, exciting field, which again, it's not. I kind of described a little bit earlier that I have different hats of what I do, and most of me actually getting a dog casted is not with a dog involved at all. As soon as they finish their training, I just have pictures in a computer. There's no casting calls. There's no auditions or anything being discovered. It doesn't matter how many, followers a dog has on Instagram or social media or anything. That, if anything, having a huge fan base is detrimental for a dog's career in studio work. So it's really kind of boring, just because it's all done on a computer. Yeah, there's that. Those are probably the top three.
And what is most rewarding for you about working with dogs?
Most rewarding. About working with dogs or working in this job?
Both.
Both. Okay. Okay, I kind of have an answer for each then. So I love working with dogs. Like I kind of explained earlier, my background is a little bit more diverse than dogs. It's more exotic animals. And so I know and have practiced, training exotic animals such as like mountain lions on walks and baboons and parrots and different kinds of birds and kookaburras and all of that. And I much prefer, even though it's less glamorous, working with a dog over exotic animals, because a dog is one of the few animals in the animal kingdom that really just want to. Other ones you can get them to want to, and it can be fun, but there's just nothing like a dog. So I really enjoy working with them for that reason. I also enjoy working with the people and the public that are bringing their dogs in, who just love their dogs so much. They want to see their dogs succeed. And so being able to be there from step one of them contacting to find more information, coming in for an evaluation, taking classes, learning how to do everything, getting submitted, waiting forever, trying really hard, keeping up on the training, and then finally getting a job and seeing the dog do well on set is extremely rewarding, because I know that without me, or I guess somebody in my position, that dog would have never done that. So that can be extremely rewarding. And on a more personal note, I find it, especially studio work, to be rewarding because it, in a way, immortalizes the dog that you worked with in that work. So for what I mean by that is, like, I had a personal dog that I also did all the training for and everything. And I didn't get her for specifically studio work. If anything, she was not a perfect candidate for it because she didn't have a very good look. She was a Belgian Malinois. And so she always looked aggressive. So she never got picked for any family dog stuff or anything because she looked aggressive, and they didn't want that. So I did the training anyways, just because I enjoyed it. And eventually she did get work because she was literally the only dog that we had that could do some of the jobs that were being called in for. And so she has done different things like a Mercury commercial. She's done a whole bunch of like commercials for random products. She also was with me on the Guinness World Records TV show where we broke a Guinness World Record together. And then also flown out to go on the Katie Couric show together to do another Guinness World Record. And so I no longer have her, but in a way, I still have more than just memories. I have these products that she has helped, represent, and I can go right back to where she was in that moment when she was doing that product, or right back to when we were in New York together on the Katie Couric show and watch us together. And so it's kind of a nice immortalization of training in a way, specifically working with dogs and in this field.
That's great. So being that you do work with the general public, is there anything that you wish owners would do or know either before they come to you or just in general having a pet?
That's a toughie. Can you repeat the question?
So what do you wish that the general public knew about dogs or dog training or the movie industry that they would do with their own dogs before they come to see you, or just like things that like annoy you, like if you go out on the street and you see someone's dog?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess I feel like a lot of people shove their dogs into my face. I don't prefer that. I like to have a personal bubble with dogs as well as with people. And I think a lot of times people think that that's, if they find their dog friendly, that bubble doesn't exist. And so I think I wish that people had a little bit stronger of etiquette when it comes to training with their dogs. Little dogs, I love to see them on the ground on leashes instead of in carriers or in people's arms. I feel like that alone could reduce a lot of aggression that I see from little dogs, of getting little dog syndrome, as we say, and barking at everything big that they see. I don't know. I guess that studio work is very specific kind of training. So like what I like to use as an example is there's a whole bunch of different kinds of training. There's obedience, there's agility, there's what else is there? Scent work, and there's studio work. And everything to the dog is almost like a different language. Your dog might know Spanish and Italian really well, but they don't necessarily know German just because they know the other two. And agility can be the same way, as in even if your dog is really, really well trained, that doesn't mean that they necessarily know studio work. And so that's probably the biggest thing that I have to educate people on when they do come in is your dog's cute. Your dog can do a lot of basic obedience stuff, maybe even has a solid stay, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it is well enough trained to go on set yet, just because it is very specific training of what the dog needs to do in order to go on set. So that's probably the biggest thing.
Can you tell us about any dogs that you're currently working with or any projects that you're currently working on?
Yeah, sure. So it's amazing how fast things can go in studio. So I did at least one this week that was also scheduled and set up this week. That was for, actually, I just remembered I can't tell you. A lot of times we have to sign NDAs, meaning that I'm not allowed to tell you about the product. But
any past
that
stuff?
Any
past stuff that you can share?
Yeah, sure. Oh, goodness. It's amazing how much everything just leaves your memory, though, when you're asked. I've done so much, and it all just disappears.
Yeah.
So let's see. With my dog, I've done bigger things like Guinness World Records TV shows and Katie Couric show, but we've also done things. We've done movies, but kind of on the lower named movies. One was called Timber the Treasure Dog, where I was in Montana for a month shooting with a husky and 2 other dogs. We've done a lot of Petco ads. We've done a lot of Google products. We've done, oh goodness, so many things. Lots of magazines, different books. We just did a calendar for Free People, which is a clothing line, store, place. We've done a lot of the pictures in the Kira Sundance, 101 Things to Do with Your Dog. A lot of just random things. You wouldn't necessarily recognize our dogs, but you have seen our work. You have seen them, but you would never know their names.
So
we're sneaky in that way,
which is good. I think that's just protecting the dog in and of itself is great. As you know, you talk about the general public can come in and you teach group classes and I'm assuming it's really not anything different than going into like an acting class or that type of thing, because it's definitely a different genre of the training world. But as you know, as the general public comes in for a class, are they, if their dog gets called out that you have a job for them, does the owner go with them to that set, or is it that you guys as handlers take the dog to the set?
So this is a layered question. Just because if a dog is still in classes, we would never submit him for a job. We only submit dogs for jobs once they are 100% good to go. They're not in their training process still, because we want to make sure that they are successful on set, because this is a very small world. And if we do poorly, or the dog is unprepared, then we're not going to get called back.
Right.
So
yep.
If a dog's in class or anything like that, it's not going on set yet. It still needs to do its training.
Okay.
When it comes to actually bringing a dog on set, it can depend on on a lot of things, actually. More and more people are having closed sets, meaning that they are trying to limit the amount of people who are on set. So we will tell owners, like, sorry, this is a closed set. It's just going to be the trainer or trainers today that are going to be there for these reasons, which is usually fine. And we'll let them know ahead of time if it is an issue. It's only an issue with a limited amount of trainers usually, or not trainers, owners. And also, most of the time, owners don't want to go on set because it's during the week or it's when they're working. And so they don't want to necessarily take the day off. So what we will do is we'll actually go to the owner's house or maybe have a meetup somewhere in between, depending on where they live, pick up the dog, go do the entire production, then go back to the owners and drop off the dog and put a check in the mail for them. So once the training is done, you know, besides just maintaining what they've learned, it's really easy on the owners.
Gotcha. So if it's mostly, well, I guess I should say it's local, right? So if somebody here in Utah had a dog that they wanted to go through the course, is it something that they could send their dog to you to go through and learn X, Y, and Z, and then, you know, they're responsible for maintaining and all of that?
So our source of classes is not or style of classes, is not like a boot camp kind of style. If anything, we really need to have the owners there. And if there's multiple owners, have them both there or whatever it might be, so that we can focus on training them how to train their dogs as opposed to me training their dog. Because I already know I can train. You know?
Yep.
And I can take any of the dogs that come in home with me for a month, and I bet I would be able to train at least most of what they needed to know.
Right.
But in the end, the dog's not going to go home with me. And sometimes it can be like upward of a year before they actually get any kind of production, if ever. So if anything, I'm going to find it a more successful class if the owner knows what they're doing. So when they are practicing at home, if the dog doesn't quite do it right, they know how to fix it. If the dog does do it right, they know how to reinforce. So again, it doesn't deteriorate over time, and the owners can actually improve on the training and keep it up at the same time. So for people who are not local, that is a pretty tricky thing, just because yes, especially if you needed to take classes,
Yeah.
we don't recommend it. Sometimes people will contact us and say, money really isn't an option or issue.
Uh-huh.
I work for the airline or whatever it might be. I can fly there really easily.
Right.
But we still don't recommend people who are not local to be involved with us specifically, just because if there is a production, it might be the next day. And in that case, the dog is probably not available if they're in Utah,
Sure.
Florida, whatever it might be. It's just not feasible. And so we like to have all of our dogs relatively nearby in Southern California so that if we do need to up and leave real fast, we can.
Right.
That being said, productions aren't necessarily all in Southern California. So we will actually, let's say, do a job in Utah.
Mm-hmm.
But when they hire us, they still hire companies who are, let's say, in LA to then train the dogs, grab the dogs, drive dogs or fly dogs, depending on time and dog,
Sure. Yep.
to you and do the production there rather than finding trainers in their own area to do the work. So we don't recommend if you're not local to get involved specifically with our headquarters with that.
Yeah.
We are in the development of making a new website, however, and on our website we're going to have training classes and whatnot. And so if people want to, from other areas other than Southern California, do the training, they can go onto this website. They can take the classes basically on there through the videos that we've made. And then try to find work in their local areas, which of course would be small.
Sure.
But it would be things like working with schools or working with student projects or that kind of stuff that is going to be more likely to be in their area.
Yeah.
Who maybe can't afford a bigger company like mine.
Right. Right. So what are some of the things that the dogs in general need to know that you just kind of take us through, just kind of the very basics of what you would teach in a class?
Okay. So we have, oh my goodness, so many. We have different levels of our classes. The only things that a dog would need to know is in our first beginner level of studio work.
Mm-hmm.
So we have, beginning, intermediate, and advanced. What we're specifically training actually isn't the most important thing in the world. What's even more important than the specific tricks is the circumstances that the dog is going to have to be able to do the tricks under. So the specific tricks are things that you would normally see your dog do anyway. They're just very dog behaviors. They don't hire a dog to look like a person.
Right.
They hire a dog because they want a dog in the shot. And so it's a lot of sits, downs, standing up on cue, going to certain places on cue. We do that using what we call a mark, which is a physical object that you can place anywhere in the scene.
Mm-hmm.
And the dog is trained to run over and put their 2 front feet on it. We teach them to bark on cue. We teach them to back up on cue, to have certain eye lines, to not necessarily always look at your hand when you are trying to pay them, but to actually look at other objects in case we needed to place objects elsewhere in the scene. Again, anything you see your dog kind of do already, but on cue. And then the biggest level of the training, though, is, like I said, the circumstances. And the circumstances are everything that the dog has been trained has to be done with at least a distance between you and the dog of 20 feet. If you ever have to be closer than 20 feet to get a dog to do a trick, it basically doesn't count. Because the camera will see you, and it's not, our day to shine, it's the dog's day. So we have to always have at least a distance of 20 feet with everything that we teach. We have to be able to have the dog know how to do it under great levels of distraction. I would say most of my job and training is helping a dog through distractions. And being comfortable to continue to do the behaviors and whatnot that I'm asking them to do under all circumstances. So it doesn't matter if there's a giant machine camera thing whirling around you. It doesn't matter that we're about to drop 20,000 pink balloons on you and one hits you in the face. It doesn't matter that
Right.
there's a camera right in your face and you're supposed to ignore it like it's not there. It doesn't matter that we're on set where there is 1.5 million people, even though they're not in the shot, and there's craft services and children running around and smells because we're in a random person's house shooting or whatever it might be. All distractions, it shouldn't matter. You should still always listen to me no matter what is happening. So that's a second. Third is trainer position. So most of the time when training a dog, you are standing, 5 feet in front of the dog, but the dog can always see you standing there and wait for the next cue. With studio work, that's not necessarily the case. You might be hiding under a table. And I don't know if you've ever practiced this before, but most of the time, if you crouch down or if you hide under a table when you're training the dog goes, "What are you doing?"
Yes.
And they run over to investigate to make sure you're okay or if you're playing or something. And so having the dog maintain their distance while being in any position you want. Having people look like they're creeping over your shoulder because they will be on set. Hiding behind people and peeking your head out behind the camera guy. I had to stand on a stove once because it was the only place that a camera couldn't see me. And still listening to you and not looking at you like, I don't know what a sit is. What are you talking
Right.
about? You're all the way up there. What are you doing?
Yeah.
And then the last one is for its duration, having a longer amount of time being able to do each of these tricks. So not just necessarily one and done, not just sitting and then being like, look, I did it, or doing some kind of bigger trick like pushing a door closed or something. Look, I did it, but actually doing it over and over and over and over again, because sometimes that's what the camera guy needs, is multiple shots. So a dog that isn't going to necessarily give up, even though their first trial was successful, and second and third, and they just keep going for it. They're that motivated. So the 4 circumstances are actually the majority of our training and the hard part of the training. The specific tricks that we teach the dog to do, the dog-to-dog tricks or behaviors, are relatively easier in comparison, but they can be tricky too.
Right. And, I think what I really like what you're saying is, something that we teach over and over and over is exposure to different things, even though you may not necessarily be in that situation every day, but can your dog perform it in that situation is really a true example of the dog completely understanding the behaviors that you're asking of it. And, just a simple sit with you standing on a stove. Most dogs be like, "What are you doing up there?" And I have no idea what sit means in that position. Mm-hmm. And so,
or closing a sliding door that's glass in between you. He can see you perfectly well, asking him to sit, and they just look at you like you're crazy.
Right. Exactly. And I think, even just, this is just a great example of, dogs aren't going to, here in Utah, we're not, we don't have that. We don't have you here. And, but it's just a great example of, giving some people challenges to do with their dogs to keep training and to constantly teaching them to do different things. If I ask for a down and I'm crouched under the table, will your dog down? And I think this is just a great example that dogs with jobs are just as normal as your dog in your household. And you're in a movie no matter what, right? I mean, all of us could have a reality show in some way, shape, or form. And we should train our dogs to that crazy reality show that we live in.
Yep, I love it. It's fun. And the nice thing that a lot of times is another misconception is that, like you were kind of alluding to, sometimes people feel like studio dogs are not pets. They are. They're not service animals or anything. They're still dogs, and so they do have an extra job. They do have an extra hat, and so they know how to behave themselves and follow the rules and everything on set. But once they're done, they're just dogs. They play. They're not robots or anything, They love it. It's just an extra job that we can give an animal that generally they love to do. Yeah. So.
I have a question because I'm curious about you. You had started out your career in exotic animals and working at the zoo. As you said, you had that internship. At that stage in your life, had you imagined that you would be doing something different than you are now?
So, funny story. We are through the process of working at the Exotic Animal Training and Management Program, or the America's Teaching Zoo, we are encouraged to dabble in things that we didn't necessarily think that we would be interested in doing. And I remember we had to do this one project where you had to kind of like figure out all the different kinds of things you may or may not want to do in the animal field. And the only one that I said I would really just not like doing, not interested in the slightest bit, is studio work.
Fascinating.
I also have a background in working with people, and I have my bachelor's from UC San Diego in psychology, and I have my master's from Cal State Fullerton in counseling. So I'm also a therapist. And I really wanted to find a way to combine my passion for working with animals with my passion for working with people. So the first things that I was kind of leaning towards were more things like guide dog training or service dog training and all of that. And I interned with them as well, and it just didn't feel like a good fit. I didn't enjoy it very much, and the environment wasn't quite going to be working for me, and I couldn't see me staying there for a long term and enjoying myself long term. And so when I interned just for fun at Hollywood Paws, it was just a lot of fun. And I had a lot of the misconceptions about how it worked. And I also found a company, Hollywood Paws, that I really enjoyed. I loved the staff. I loved the training style. I loved the variety of the days. I really did just kind of fall in love with it. So I pulled a 180, because before Edom, I was not interested in the slightest bit in studio work. And after Edom, it is where I wanted to go. So yeah, it's amazing how careers can kind of meander in that way. But that is my story of ending up over doing studio work.
That's great. That's great. Do you have any questions for us?
Generally, who are your biggest listeners?
Our biggest listeners are a lot of our existing clients that have been with us for a long time. We've been in business for 10 plus years here in the Valley, and our client base and people that follow us are people that want more from training than just the basics, that they're on a journey with their dog. Not people that are looking for, I need to fix my dog's aggression problem, but our listeners are people that go on a journey with us. And we offer a lot of different things and a different variety of things throughout the year. We offer, prepping your dog for running, and we'll have a 5K at the end of it, and herding dog classes and cart pulling. And so we do different activities, and those are the people that are part of it because they just want something more.
Sure.
So it's they've all been quite fascinated with our dogs with job stuff, because they're always looking for things to do with their dogs.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're kind of an adventurous crew.
Nice. I love it. Yeah. And I mean, training is just so much fun with any animal, particularly dogs, because they enjoy it so much. When I had my own dog, as well as the other animals that I own, I did all of production work, but I also did scent work, agility. I did anything that I could get my hands on, just because training can be so much fun, and my dog just would fall in love with whatever we were doing. So definitely a big advocate for that.
That's awesome. I think as we're talking, I'm pretty inspired that I think we may take a field trip down for a weekend and come tour and get a little bit more out of you. Just to, it's fun and it's fascinating. There's definitely people that there's a lot of myths out there with acting careers for animals, and
so many, and most of the time people have no idea.
Yeah.
I burst a lot of bubbles.
Yeah. So we'll definitely figure out a time after May to come down and take a tour. It's super fun to hear everything, and I think our clients and listeners would love to see us live down there and talk to you a little bit more.
There you go.
Do you have any other questions for us?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay.
What
Super.
do most people ask?
Oh, it depends. It depends. Yeah. So that's good. I appreciate your time in a busy schedule, and we will be in touch for sure.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.